At the end of the day, we are the myth. We all come from that. That's the stories of our ancestors. After thousands of years, we are still them. And we are still learning exactly the same lessons.
They transcend race, culture, time, space, gender.
Yeah. Sometimes we're also surprised how we are still learning the same lessons after thousands of years. It seems like we haven't really mastered them yet.
In today's busy world, how can we find the inspiration, knowledge, and energy to live a healthy and empowered life? If we balance and harmonize our mind, exercise our body, live according to the laws of nature, and connect to spirit, can we find a way to heal, become our authentic self, and live our purpose with love? I am your hostess, Amy Fournier, and welcome back to Awakening Aphrodite. Hey everybody, I'm sure you know how important it is to help your body properly detoxify. My goodness, if we really looked at how many toxins we are exposed to, toxins in the air, toxins inside homes, mold, furnishings, as well as food sources, all these things that our bodies are dealing with, we got to help it out. Energy Bits Algae Tabs are nutrition powerhouses that are great not only for detoxification, but also for energy and for beauty. I love Energy Bits because they have only one ingredient, algae, which is a superfood. They're 100% natural. They're also vegan, super high in antioxidants, high in omega-3 fatty acids, which can help with brain function, moods, reduce inflammation and muscle soreness. And this is great for people who don't like to eat a lot of vegetables. I mean, this is like a superfood. I can't emphasize enough. This is why I have it on my website. You can use my coupon code AMYF at checkout and you can save a whopping 20%. Please try them. Let me know what you think. I promise you won't be disappointed. Hey everybody, I want to share with you the newest item I added to my website eStore. Modern Om is a company that gets it. They make ancient tools for modern living. One of the things I love from Modern Om is their shungite. Have you heard about shungite? Okay, this is the new rage in the world of crystals because I'm sure you are aware of the effects of electromagnetic radiation. Human-made radiation, artificial radiation. You know your body's a battery. It's electric, okay? And all these things are affecting our biorhythms and our energy and our ability to sleep and think clearly, whether you have brain fog or not. We want to protect ourselves in the way that we can. One of the ways you can do that is by using shungite crystals because it can protect you from harmful electromagnetic frequencies. It can help boost your energy, relieve stress, detoxify your body and mind, and increase physical and mental balance. So, the only place that I get shungite right now is from Modern Om. They have gorgeous jewelry. They're responsibly sourced. Please check out Modern Om. The link is on my website, eStore. Have fun shopping. I know I did. I always have to pull it back because I pretty much want everything. Okay, everybody, now let's get to the show. Welcome back to Awakening Aphrodite with Amy Fournier. This show is about helping you to be healthy and fit in mind, body, and spirit, as well as harmonize your masculine and feminine energy, tap into your intuition, your true source of power, and awaken your authentic self. Today, I have a fascinating discussion with Letao Wang. Letao is a spiritual counselor as well as astrologer and tarot specialist. We take a nice deep dive, which is just the way I like it, into working with oracles, the tarot, and understanding mythology and how we can apply it to our everyday life. We go into detail about a couple very popular myths that you've probably heard of, particularly if you've been listening to my show, because we get into a couple of my favorites. Helen of Troy, you know, the famous, most beautiful woman in the world that was said to have launched 1,000 ships. Yep, that Helen. And we talk about Atalanta. Have you heard of Atalanta before? Well, she's someone you might want to hear about because it's a very, very interesting story. And we get into why myths might be able to help us in the modern day and age. What are they anyway? And how can we apply their timeless classic wisdom to our everyday lives that it benefits us in some way. Letao was a very interesting individual. He was named Spiritual Guide of the Year in 2020 by the Hong Kong Living magazine. He also writes a column on astrology for Hong Kong magazine, and he's a member of the Hong Kong Society for Counseling and Psychology, and he has 2 masters, one in counseling and another in translating and interpreting Chinese and English. This guy is so interesting, and I love how deep he is on the knowledge of all these ancient myths. We talk about the link between astrology and myths, the role of religion and gods and goddesses, and kind of coming to terms with ourselves when we're dealing with myths and looking at oracles and tarot decks. Do you get kind of guilty and freaked out like maybe you're doing something wrong or like devil worship? Well, we talk about that. Letao gives his tips on how to use oracle decks effectively. And we talk about feminine power in general and tapping into our own unique gifts and how that's really how we have the juice, the magic and power behind our lives. And Letao shares with us Orpheus, the wounded healer, and how it's important to trust our intuition as well as some tips to do that. So I know you're going to love this show. It's such an interesting conversation. If you're interested in this type of topic, some of the other episodes of Awakening Aphrodite you might want to check out include episode 27, which is a classic with the one and only James Wanless, Dr. Wanless. We talk about, is the tarot devil worship? I love that episode. James is just a hot ticket. He is such a character, and you're going to learn a lot. Episode 27. And the 3 episodes we have with astrologer extraordinaire, my personal astrologer, and one of my favorite mentors, Marilyn Dumont. She came on the show 3 times. If you're interested in astrology and this type of thing, you might want to check out episodes 54, 77, and 199. Let's now join my guest, spiritual counselor, astrologer, and tarot specialist, Letao Wang. Welcome back to Awakening Aphrodite with Amy Fournier. The show is about helping you to be healthy and fit in mind, body, and spirit, as well as harmonize your masculine and feminine energy, tap into your intuition, your true source of power, and awaken your authentic self. Today, my guest is Letao Wang, who is located in Hong Kong at a god-awful dark 30 time in the morning. Thank you, Letao, for joining the show.
Hello, Amy. Thank you so much for having me today.
My goodness, God bless you for getting up so early. I kind of apologize that I didn't realize when we scheduled it, it was going to be so crazy. But how are you today? Are you still sleepy or are you awake?
I'm very good. I'm all ready. I'm very excited about about this podcast. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Wonderful. I am so thrilled to share this absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous oracle book that you have created. And this is just right up my alley, my friend. I mean, you have blended Greek mythology, basically all mythology, ancient mythology, with astrology. I mean, what a brilliant, brilliant thing to do. Can you tell us how you came to this beautiful creation? Did you just kind of get an epiphany, a download? I mean, how did this come about?
Right. So my journey, right, to create this oracle deck, we have to go back to probably years ago when I started my training as an astrologer, because my first astrology teacher was a different kind. Yeah, most astrology courses you will study, they will start talking about, for example, the basic knowledges about planets and the stars. But my teacher started with Greek mythology. As we all know, the name of the planets, Venus, Mars, all these names, they derive from ancient Roman myth. They are the same name, right, with the gods. And so my first understanding about astrology was actually from the stories. And that's when I started really reading Greek and Roman mythology. And I would say that was a starting point. And of course, throughout my study journey, right, I encountered a lot of different authors and the teachers who taught me a lot of things about Greek mythology. For example, one of the teachers that I really admire, you can also find his endorsement on the back of the box. His name is Mr. Gao Sasson, and I've learned a lot from him. And throughout the years, we have been emailing back and forth, and I gained a lot of inspiration about learning the ancient stories and the myth. And that's how I realized, the very intricate correlation between astrology and mythology. And I really think that through learning mythology, we'll be able to reach a much deeper level, in our understanding about astrology and also psychology.
So can you explain to us kind of like a 101 foundational level of what is the connection between astrology and myths?
Well, let's use, for example, our podcast is called Awakening Aphrodite, right? And so the Roman god, the counterpart in Roman myth of Aphrodite is Venus, the goddess of beauty, the goddess of love. And in astrology, she also rules similar things. For example, she rules our sense of beauty. She rules how we love ourselves and how we love the world around us. And also, more interesting, she rules our sense of value. Now, what we deem important in our life. And this is what we learn about astrology, and Venus in astrology. And in, let's say, in mythology, when we study important stories, what we'll learn about her is her, passionate love affair with Ares, or with Mars, right? The Roman god of war. And we also learn about her in the story Eros and Psyche, because Venus is actually the mother of Eros, right? And how she gave the tasks to Psyche, so that eventually they can have a union, a marriage together. And so this is what I feel about how we can for example, deepen our understanding about the planet Venus. When we read through those stories and we understand who she is and what she's looking for and what she wants us to be. And this is what I find interesting about them. Yeah.
Now, where would someone who's listening to this that maybe grew up religious
Right.
come in to understand? So we're talking about goddesses and gods, and they think, oh, there's only one God. We're not supposed to worship other gods or goddesses. Like, so for me to understand someone like an Aphrodite, right? Like, I feel like this is wrong, or just do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, what we are doing is not God worshiping. Of course, there might be just a little part of us wanting to worship the so-called our gods, right, or our goddesses anyway. But I think the most important thing is about learning those archetypes. Once we see those planets as idols or as gods, then of course that becomes a little bit more complicated. Then we would have all these concerns about, am I allowed to worship her or him? Am I allowed to, because I already believe in, let's say, the God in my own religion, right? I'm not allowed to worship other gods. But sometimes we might just need to see them as different archetypes. It's a little bit like, a little child watching, I don't know, Superman movie, right?
Yeah.
Or Batman, right? And so it's a little bit like finding our inner hero, or
Yes.
our, someone to look up to, let's put it this way, right? And what we learn from those stories rather than doing the so-called worshiping per se. Yeah. So I think there's a huge difference between them.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, Letao, is that, we're talking about archetypes. And if we believe that God is all, God created everything, God, goddess, right? The feminine, masculine, ultimate source created everything. That means everything there is was created by God, goddess. And that includes all of these concepts of gods, goddesses. And these are just extensions or thought forms that are existent within ourselves, because if everything is everything, then everything is everything, and that means that is included within us. So we're just talking about aspects of ourselves that we can tap into, and that's what I've learned about archetypes is they increase your awareness as to maybe dormant qualities or abilities or attributes of yourself that you can tap into at certain times. So like for me, I named the show Awakening Aphrodite because it was a period in my life where I was way in my left brain over masculinized with trying to, be ambitious and work and, really push myself, and really disassociated with my body and pleasure in enjoying life. And yeah, absolutely. The irony is it probably did tie into self-love, which I learned Aphrodite. Everyone thinks Aphrodite, kind of is superficial, vain, the goddess of beauty, but no, it's self-love. Self-love. You can't really truly love, we've all heard that expression, someone else unless you love yourself, right? So for me, tapping into Aphrodite, awakening Aphrodite has been about bringing out those aspects within myself through her, this archetype of a goddess, not that I'm worshiping a false idol, so just kind of working through that religious piece, because I do know a lot of listeners, are, in the Western, the prevalence of Christianity. It can be even a subconscious sticking point for some people, like, okay, they might be on board with it or think it's kind of cool when they hear about heroes or heroines and, gods and goddesses, but they feel a little bit conflicted. Like, oh, I don't know if I really want to get into this because I feel like this guilt in the back of my head, and like I'm going to be damned to hell. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think, archetypes actually really, right, they exist everywhere. Even when we talk about, let's say, religious studies, right? What we're really studying is actually archetypes. That's at least, what I believe in. So for example, when we study tarot, right? Of course, there are, 78 cards there, the major arcana and the minor arcana. And some of the cards are actually really they're related to religion, but they're just archetypes. Like one of the example I can give is, for example, there's a card called Eight of Cups in the minor arcana, and that card usually I see that, right? So if you look at that card, it's a man wearing a red cape, and he's walking away from the Eight Cups behind him, right? I'm sure you're familiar with that
Yeah,
card.
sure.
So my client would ask me, what does that card mean? And I say, you know what? Sometimes I see this man on the card as Moses.
Wow.
The guy actually in the Old Testament, and my client would be like, okay, tell me more. And I said, this is actually the moment when he realized what his mission is, what his calling is, and that is why he left his comfort, he left everything that he was familiar with, and he decided to go to Egypt to save the slaves, right? And so things like that. So even when we do either Bible study or whatever religion that we grew up with, let's say, it's about the archetypes that we see in there. And so there's nothing wrong with religious study or anything, and there's also nothing wrong with studying mythology. It's just whatever that you feel most comfortable connected with.
Great point, Letao, because what you're basically saying is we've got to like pull it back and remember that really it's about the symbolism. You know what I mean? We're talking about how everything is everything, and to bring it back to how we can apply to our lives now for us to learn and love better. Like for your point, like, okay, if I pull the Eight of Cups, here I am incarnate as a woman, right? And okay, there's a man on the card, but that could be many ways to be interpreted. I have to look at it symbolically. And when we start to look at life symbolically, it just opens up so many more imaginative, mystical, magical doors in our creativity and kind of let spirit in. So I would look at it like, okay, that's a man, but I'm a woman. Why did I get that card? What's this about? And it also teaches us, Letao, like these oracle decks, whether they be tarot or your beautiful deck, is to pay attention, to stop and really pay attention to what's in front of you. Look at the detail. You look at that card. It's a man. I'm a woman. Okay, what does that mean? Well, it might be my masculine side of me today is going on a journey. His back is to the face of the card. He's walking away. So he's leaving. So he, like you said, he's leaving the comfort of the home. So leaving something, the known, to go on a journey. I never heard anyone say it could be Moses. It's cool, but he has a staff for sure. And he's wearing a red cape. Red is the first chakra, the symbol of his safety, his security, his tribe. So he feels safe enough and his secure in his being to go out on his own. The cups are behind him. I think there's water in the card. It's like, so if we look at the symbolism, so that's the subconscious, right? So if we think of life and when we use oracle decks, and I'd like to know what you think about your tips on how to use an oracle deck. My 2 cents would be, I love it, Letao, because it, like I said, it opens up that right brain. It's a right brain access tool, which Awakening Aphrodite, my audience and I are trying to do more of. How do we access the other half of our being that we don't access in the everyday life? So oracle cards can do that through their use of symbolism. So any thoughts on that or tips to using these oracle decks effectively?
Right. So, there are so many different types of oracle cards on the market, right? When I created this deck, I really wanted this deck to be, I put a lot of effort into the guidebook writing, right? Because some of the cards you can see, the guidebook is very thin, and maybe the author wants you to rely more on the images, right? And to just give you the freedom to sense, what's actually on the image. But for me, from the beginning, I told my publisher, I said I would love this book. Just, at least I want it to be a little bit like my own rendition of Greek mythology, because I really want people to understand those stories. And from those stories, naturally, they will find the so-called guidance, or they will be able to connect those stories with their own past experience in order to have their own interpretation, right? For example, each card has the keyword, right, on the card.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that it's just single dimensional as that, right? So for example, yeah, leadership with Theseus, right? The first card, first deck and the varies. Yeah. So for different people, they might have different, yeah, they resonate differently with this word leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Um, right. So I really want them to read the stories of Theseus and and also Bellerophon, those stories, and relate to their own experience and how they want to interpret the card. And that is the reason why I think in the first chapter, right, I specifically talked about how you should not, follow the book too much, follow the teaching too much. You should learn the teaching, but also use your own imagination and your own intuition to tell you how the stories are related to you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, I think, how we can develop our intuition. Because at least that's how I did. I studied and I started everything from stories. And that's how I developed my own ability to do readings for my clients. Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that for us? Because this is beautiful. We love learning how to develop our intuition. So you developed your own intuition by studying the myths, and then what? Like, tell us exactly how.
So I would say, for example, let's say during a reading session, right, with a client, sometimes you can just see literally the client is the character in the myth. Like, for example, I remember very clearly there was one time I had a client, she was just going through a lot of difficulties in her life, and she also had a difficult childhood. And the first card she pulled out, which, usually the first card a client pulls out is let's say their general energy, right? What they really need to understand about them. And she put out this character called Atalanta.
I was going to ask you about her. Oh, excuse
Yeah,
me. I was going to. Oh,
awesome.
she's like first, like number one thing we got to talk about. But please go ahead. She pulled out
Oh, great.
Atlanta.
Yeah. So and then she was telling me, her life. And she said she was, for example, she grew up in a family without a father. See, Atlanta was
Oh.
abandoned by her own father. So, and the whole story started, her father, throwing her away, right? Because she was a woman, she was a girl. Her father wanted a son.
Yeah.
And so she felt her whole life, so this client of mine, she felt her whole life she had to prove to the people around her that she was good enough. It's almost like she was living for the validation and the approval from other people. And that's how she finds the so-called her satisfaction, right? Or how successful she is. But she never really was really fulfilled in that sense. She works really hard. And she was really trying, you can see, right? And she was a doer, not a talker, but she just felt that she was drained, she was tired, but she didn't know what to do. And I was like, well, it's so interesting that you put out this card. So I talked about the story of Atlanta. I said, at the end, even though Atalanta was trying, in the story, she was trying to be a male, actually. She remained her virginity. She swore to Artemis, and she said, I'll never let a man touch me because I want to be as strong as a man, right? Because being with a man would distract me, etc., etc. But at the end, when she finally reunited with her father, the first wish from her father was, I'd like you to marry a guy, right? So finally, I can have a son-in-law because I've always wanted a son, right? So it's very ironic because all Atlanta wanted was to have her father acknowledge her as a man, but her father couldn't do that, even though they reunited. So through that story, what does the client learn from, about her own life? Her, let's say, this obsessive needs to have people validate her and give her the approval. But what about her own acknowledgement? What about her own the so-called self-love, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean by learning mythology and developing our intuition. Because at the end of the day, we are the myth. We all come from that. That's the stories of our ancestors. So after thousands of years, we are still them. And we are still learning exactly the same lessons. Yeah.
Well, they transcend race, culture, time, space, gender. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes we're also surprised how we are still learning the same lessons after thousands of years. It seems like we haven't really mastered them yet.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of the human journey, right?
Yeah.
Well, could you just perhaps, I think this Atalanta is such a key one, not to mention Aphrodite's involved with her myth, but I know you just touched on it briefly, but could you possibly kind of just tell us, start to the beginning, expand on any details of Atalanta, like, how she was an unwanted princess? And, I think it's important for the discussion.
Yes, first of all, I'm so glad that you actually picked this
Oh, God, yeah.
character in Greek mythology. She's so fascinating, right, in Greek myth because she's very complex, and I think that's the reason why we love her. She's very multidimensional, right? She had a very tragic childhood because her father, as the king, didn't really want her the moment she was born. So she was abandoned by him, but later she was saved by a bear. In some myth, they say the bear was sent to her by the goddess of the moon, Artemis, right? So,
Artemis, yeah.
of course, because Artemis was the goddess of hunting and the moon, and she was fierce. And so that's how, what Atlanta learned, right, as a girl, right? She wanted to be Artemis. She wanted to be that fierce woman. But in her mind, she was always thinking that if I can become strong or stronger than a guy, maybe my father will take me back because he wants a guy, right? And if I can be better than a guy, then I'll have my father's love. And we can see this kind of situation in people that sometimes we live our lives to earn our parents' validation. Maybe we never felt that we live up to their expectations. And I think this happened to us more often than not, consciously or subconsciously. Then finally, she achieved so many different things. And her father took her back, but the father said, well, you have to marry someone. And so yeah, which is ironic, right? And
Yeah.
then, of course, she had a lot of suitors because she is a beautiful woman. Her only condition to marry a guy was to have a guy beat her in a foot race.
Yeah, well, she devised a plan to get out of having to be married.
Exactly,
So
right?
yeah.
Because she's so fast and she's so strong, nobody can win against her in the
Yeah.
foot race. But eventually there was a guy whose name was Hippomenes, and he went to the goddess of love, Aphrodite, because as you know, Aphrodite is the goddess of love. She wants people to be together and fall in love and have children.
She actually didn't like that Artemis was so independent.
Yeah, she didn't, right? Because the love and the sexual union, those are the areas Aphrodite rules, right? So she said, okay, you want to be with her, I'm gonna help you. So she gave him 3 golden apples, and she said, when you're competing with her in a foot race, whenever she gets ahead of you, just roll a golden apple and she will be distracted. And then that's the only way for you to win. And so with Aphrodite's help, Hippomenes actually won. And so Aphrodite had to marry him. of course, the end, the ending of the story is, it's also a little bit tragic.
It's totally tragic. The whole thing is tragic, I think.
Yeah.
Sad
So,
to say.
right, so Hippomenes actually misled her, and they had sex in, some people say in Zeus' temple, some people say it's in Athena's temple. There are also different versions of the myth, but, of course, due to this blasphemous act, they were transformed into animals. And so they couldn't be together, anymore as a couple, right? And so that's how the story went. But I think that we learned so much from this story, because Atalanta, she was very complex. She wanted success. She wanted to achieve so many things. She wanted that validation from the society, right? In that type of very strict and traditional patriarchal society, that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to be a man. But at the end of the day, she had to compromise, and she was also, in a way, destroyed by the man that she married. And we can see the story from all different kind of dimensions, and we learn what's the lesson there. See, for example, one of the things that I feel about Atlanta was, why did she need to earn that validation from her father? Was that really worth it? What if she just became a very successful huntress just for herself, instead of going to her father and say, now I'm better, can you take me back? And I think that's probably the first mistake that she had. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I like that, you mentioned that we can look at myths and stories in many different dimensions and ways. And another way would be if we even zoom out, like even a bigger lens, and look at the masculine and feminine component of that myth, in that basically Atalanta abandoned herself. Her whole thing was because she was abandoned by her father. But when she agreed to get married, so to stay in her father's good graces, she abandoned her own values and herself and her desire to remain sovereign and independent unto herself. And so she abandoned the feminine in her values, for the masculine external validation. That's another way we can look at it. And that's why Artemis was ticked off and punished her and turned them both into lions after they had sex, right? I mean, it's a very, Letao, it's like myths are teaching stories, right? Isn't that the whole point of all of this? Yeah, they're entertaining, but this is why before we had TV and Netflix and all this, at night, we would gather around the campfire and talk and tell stories. And the wise elders would tell teaching stories to the younger ones. And this is how people learned, and we evolved as a species by direct experience of sharing stories and knowledge. And that's what myths are about, right?
Yeah, and I also think that myth probably, there, who says there was no such person in the past anyway?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I do think that myth is, of course, is myth. It's our human imagination, but somehow there has to be some facts in there. And I remember very clearly, the first time I traveled all the way to Greece to see, where the myths, come from. I was on a tour to see the temple of Poseidon. But that day was very funny because in Cape Sunion, but very funny because that day I was the only one showed up apart from the driver.
Yeah.
And so the driver, it's a local Greek guy, right? And so he was asking me, he said, why are you here on your own? What do you like? Because, usually families, right? They travel to Greece,
Yeah.
right? Children, husband, wife, but I was on my own. And the driver said, what do you like about Greece? Yeah. And I said, well, I like Greek mythology. And he asked me this question, very interesting. He said, do you think myths are real? Do you think, those stories are actually real? Yeah, this is a question from a local, Greek bus driver. And I said, you know what? I'd love to believe they're real, right? Because, that's how we learn things from those stories. Because there has to be something related to our human experience. And he actually said, I think that they're not 100% real, but probably 50% they're real. And he said, for example, Hercules, right? He said probably there was a guy who was extremely strong, and he, who overcame a lot of difficulties, right? He was worshipped by people as a god or the son of Zeus. But maybe, as human, we added a lot of imagination, extra details in the stories, and that became the modern day Hercules version. Yeah, so that's what I think. Yeah.
I would think too, Letao, that a lot of these heroes and heroines or gods and goddesses are like composites,
Mm,
and but I totally believe that, and again, they're extensions of what's in us as humans, right? I mean, this is the
yeah.
whole point. So, um, I love it. That's fantastic. Another one I would love for you to go into detail with us is Helen of Troy. Helen of
Well, she's
Troy,
also
baby.
very, very popular.
You
Yeah.
can't get off Awakening Aphrodite without talking about Helen of Troy. I did a Fast Fridays mini episode on this that we'll put in the show notes for people. Please tell us the story. I want to hear your version, Letao, of Helen of Troy.
Yes. Helen is also, she's very complex, I feel. She is, well, considered the most beautiful mortal female in the world back then. She was originally married to the king Menelaus, the king of Sparta. But due to, there's another story, right? The judgment of Paris, right? And that's a whole at a different level, right? So eventually Paris chose her. So Aphrodite made sure that she will fall in love with Paris. And so she eloped with Paris to Troy, and she kind of abandoned her own husband in Sparta. She went to Troy, and according to myth, she actually lived very happily with Paris, right? And there for 10 years, and until the Trojan War happened, right? And Troy was completely destroyed by the Greek army. Of course, Paris also died in the war. And what was funny about that was eventually when Menelaus saw Helen again, he was trying to punish her or kill her, right? Strike her down. But what
He was
she
kind
did
of
was
ticked
she just
off.
dropped. Yeah, but Helen just dropped her robe, dropped her dress, and she said she became naked again. And she said, "Well, but I still love you." And Menelaus just embraced
Are
her and
you
said,
sure you
"Okay."
want to kill me now?
Yeah, he
she,
just embraced her and said, "Okay, now come back to Sparta with me," right?
she pulled out her best weapon.
100%. Yeah, that's her beauty, her sexuality, everything. So we really see Helen as this complex character, right? So on one side, some people can say, oh, she, abandons her husband to go to another man, she's, not loyal, all that kind of stuff, right? But sometimes I see Helen as, so what's the reason why she was able to do that? Because I don't believe any person was able to do that. She was able to do that, and she was able to somehow find her own pleasure, okay, find her happiness and her comfort through being with Paris in Troy and also with Menelaus. And so I think it's all about her knowing who she is. She knows she's beautiful, and she embraces her own sense of beauty. And I think, especially I would say for the past 2 weeks, I've got clients constantly pulling this card out from the deck.
Wow.
Yeah, this card has been quite prominent during the past 2 weeks.
What a coincidence. And I brought it up.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So I feel the image of Helen is really about knowing your own value. So she's a little bit like Aphrodite, right? She's like the mortal Aphrodite actually out there, because she has the power to seduce any man that she actually wants to be with, and she can be happy with them. But when things change, when Paris passed away, and she's also, she moves on to Menelaus, and because she knows who she is. And so, sometimes we also learn things about Helen is like sometimes when we look at our own relationships in life, it's not encouraging us to be not loyal to our partners and things like that. But it's more about before we even talk about relationships, do you think you are beautiful? Do you think you have a Helen in you? And how much do you love yourself? And also, are you comfortable with your own sexual being, right? Because the keyword of Helen is sexuality, right? I've seen a lot of clients having blockages in that sense, right? Maybe in career, they're ultra confident, right? They are, they're achiever, right? But when it comes to dealing with a romantic partner, they're not confident. They're extremely insecure on the other side of the spectrum. And so, and a lot is to deal with maybe deep down, they don't think that they're valuable, or they don't think they're sexy. They don't think they're beautiful in that sense. I think Helen could be a very good mythological character to learn from. Yeah.
So, okay, so in your view, Matt, then they're pulling that card because that could mean what, Letao? Like their inner Helen is saying, you need to give me a little more attention to cultivate this more in you.
Yeah, and also just feeling comfortable with what we are given to this world. I mean, if we want to do the fault finding, we can find anything that we don't like about ourselves, I think. And it doesn't mean that, we just kind of go out there and say, oh, I'm perfect, right? Oh, I'm a, I'm a 10, Well, of course, we know that, none of us are 10 actually. Well, unless you're a supermodel. But for me, it's a little bit about, but there are always ways to improve ourselves, but you have to really be comfortable with what you are. And that's the first step before we even talk about how we love someone else. Helen is very good at doing that, I think.
Yes. And again, that back to our original discussion of these are about the attributes that are within us that we can draw out, that's what we got to remember. You also mentioned, I never heard anyone talk about Helen of Troy as the power of choice. Can you expand on that a little bit? She represents the feminine power, obviously, but you mentioned how, you feel that she represents our power to choose. This is very important.
Well, because at the end of the day, right, when we look at, all these events in Helen's life, most of them are her own choice. She chose to do those things because she, like what I said, because she knows who she is. She was not forced into marrying anyone. She was not being forced. Some people, in some version of the myths, they say Helen was abducted by Paris. But also there are other myths saying that she willingly eloped with Paris. And also the thing is, if she was really, against her will, right? Let's say Paris abducted her. How did she live happily in Troy for the 10 years, right? So, she could have run away. She could have, let's say, struggled, right, with Paris. She could have, pointed, at Paris with a knife and say, don't you dare touch me. But she enjoyed actually her life with Paris.
Well, she fell in love with him, right? I mean,
100%, right? So, in Helen's life, you never see suffering there.
Yeah.
She was never really suffering. She chose to do these things because, again, she knows who she is and she knows what she can enjoy. And that's what I mean by the so-called choice. Yeah.
Because
because in our life, we are also allowed to choose what makes us feel good. And the thing is, can we overcome that psychological hurdle to really choose that?
I think another very interesting teaching lesson component of the story of Helen of Troy is that, in those days, women weren't allowed to choose anything. They were married off. People had classes and, expectations and roles. And there were, we got to remember, this is not modernity. Women had, this is what you happen. It doesn't matter what you want, who you love, whatever. So there was no power of choice. There was no choice for really anybody, men as well. And for her, to me, again, if we zoom out, a lesson can be a woman might, so she's the ultimate in mortal feminine beauty, which is why Aphrodite loved her more than any other goddesses did, because she represented the ultimate for the female form in the mortal world. But most women are not going to think, oh, I'm so unbelievably, breathtakingly, irresistibly beautiful, and I captivate everybody that I get what I want all the time. Like, most of us, mere mortals, are not living that experience. So how do we extrapolate this to ourselves? So what it tells me is that Helen owned her innate gifts. She was gifted to be absolutely breathtakingly the most beautiful woman in the world.
Yeah.
And she leaned into it, Letao. She
Right.
leaned into that gift. So for everyone listening and watching, what that tells me is for us, and you mentioned she knew herself, which
Yeah.
is basically what you're saying. So for us to really get clear on who we are, what our innate gifts are, whatever they are, it could
Yeah.
be, I'm really good at making beds. I don't know. It doesn't have to be anything sexy and extravagant. It can
Right.
be just knowing what is it where I really shine, and then leaning into those gifts and choosing our lives along cultivating and utilizing those gifts and watching the doors open. To me, that's what Helen of Troy can teach us as well.
100%. I absolutely agree with you on that. Especially I think, a lot of us don't really get to know our gift, especially when we're younger, right? It's very rare to have someone, they're telling us, oh, I think, you're very good at doing this. You should do this and things that we don't really hear that, especially, I don't know about, your family, but, especially, for someone like me who grew up in a very traditional Chinese family, your parents never tell you that. I don't know if you know much about, Chinese culture. Our parents, the way for them to show they love us is to cook us a nice meal, and that's it. You will never hear our parents never tell us that they love us, actually. So that's why we don't. It's very to be honest, it's actually uncomfortable. I think if you have any audience of Chinese descent, right, and I believe that they will understand this. It's very rare for a Chinese mother to say, I love you. It's so weird for me to imagine my mother saying that. It's just so bizarre and it's so uncomfortable. But we know they love us, right?
So by demonstrating like actions.
Yes, but they never say it.
And that's a cultural thing.
It's a cultural thing,
How
100%.
about a physical affection, Letao?
Depends on the parents, to be honest, but it's very also I think it's very rare for a Chinese parent to somehow hug you every day, and it's no. At least when I was a teenager, in high school, I can't really even remember. Actually, now my mother hugged me more often compared to when I was a kid, to be honest.
How do you think that upbringing, both in your family and the culture at large in China, influenced your work in mythology and astrology?
To be honest, mythology was not really a part of my childhood at all. My parents were very traditional, and especially Greek mythology, right? If they're not Chinese mythologies, right? Even let's say kids who are interested in Chinese mythology, like let's say the Monkey King, right? Journey to the West, those things. You only get to read them when you are really young. Let's say you are 4, 5, 6 years old. But once you start school, all these things need to be thrown out of the window because traditionally speaking, either Chinese parents, they want you to study math, they want you to study science, they want you to go to your piano lessons and all that kind of stuff, right? And so
sounds like our parents. Sounds the
yeah,
same.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get serious. Come on. You're going to get a real job. I heard that.
Exactly, right. So, also it took me many, many years to be able to really tell my parents what I'm doing as a career, right?
Oh boy.
As a spiritual counselor, because
How'd that go?
well, for a long, actually, they didn't say much, but for a long time they refused to to tell their the other family members and their friends what I did, because I guess deep down they felt it was not something that is, I don't know, good enough. It's not, like a glamorous job, right? Oh, because I remember my father always wanted me to, because I used to work in finance, right? I used to work in a bank in my mid-20s. And you wear a suit every day, you look sharp, and you go to work. And for my father, that's a proper job, right? And they can say, oh, my son works for this investment bank, he's making money, blah, 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 right? And it's for parents, right? That's what they want to see. But they can't, when you tell them, oh, I read cards for people, for him, it's a little bit, that's shameful. I can't tell people you do that. And so it took them a long time to actually really be okay with it. so that's just what it is. And of course, I was upset for a long time because I felt, why can't you guys just accept
Of course.
this, right? And why can't you just be happy for me? But of course, now everything is fine.
Took a
But it
while.
took a lot. It took them a long time to understand this, because they also didn't grow up with this.
Of
They
course.
never, they lived in, they were born, both of them were born in the early 1950s. So they
Mhm.
experienced the Cultural Revolution, right? All the political upheavals. Let's say, in the 1960s, the 1970s in China. So they never really had, let's say, the beautiful childhood that we think they should have. So I don't blame them. I think their reaction, it comes from their experience, and that's just what it is. I'm actually very grateful that finally, they can come to terms with what I do now.
Ultimately, it's just that's what they knew, and they just wanted what was best for you, and they were afraid that you weren't going to be okay doing this weird job. Like ultimately, it's because they loved you, right? It was their intentions
Yeah.
were good. So I just have to ask you though, because this is a very inspiring story in that how did you stick to your guns and do it anyway, Letao? Because, I did the same thing in a similar way, went the career path my dad kind of implied indirectly that I should be doing, in not so many words, but absolutely very clear, trust me, because I was into fitness and this and that too, but that wasn't a real job. You're not going to make any money at that. Was interested in the theater and, performing. I was a dancer. Needless to say, I got really veered and whatever. But how did you, stick to it in spite of them not approving?
I actually didn't tell them for a long time. I started the Healing Kingdom back in the late 2014 and the very beginning of 2015. Of course, I didn't tell them. I was still working, with my bank job during the daytime, and I would see clients to do their reading sessions um, around, after work, from 7 to 10 p.m. and also over the weekend. So it was a lot of work, actually.
Wow.
Uh,
Yeah.
I had no
Two jobs.
time for myself. Yeah. And I remember the toughest time that I had was back in 2017. There was a bar actually in central Hong Kong. It's actually an American bar. They opened their Asian branch, yeah, in Hong Kong, and their owner found me and said, we would like you to do readings in our bar. But you need,
Whoa.
yeah, for our customers, but you need to be here at least 3 times a week,
Oh boy.
right? And bars don't open early. They only
Right.
open like 6, 7 p.m., right?
Ooh,
And
yeah.
and they close at 2 p.m. So 3 times a week, I also have to go there to do readings between 8 p.m. and 1 a.m. And that
Whoa.
and that and you can imagine I had a bank job during the daytime and I had
Oh,
no time to sleep at all. And now, of course, I will never do that again, right? But now
you paid
thinking
your
back,
dues.
yeah, but now thinking back, why I did that and how I really, just like, whatever happens, I'm gonna make this happen, was
Wow.
really because I guess I knew who I was. I
Wow.
knew that this is my path. And, even if I die, I'm gonna die as a spiritual counselor, as a reader. I'm not gonna die as a banker. You know what I mean? That's
I
just
love
what
it. That's so inspiring.
yeah, I just knew
Such a
that.
great lesson.
Right. And eventually, of course, like what I said, I would never do that again because I kind of destroyed my health around that time. You can imagine working that much and not having enough sleep, and
I
all
was not
that,
sleeping.
right?
I was just thinking, yeah.
So
Yeah.
then I realized that and I remember I went to my own spiritual teacher at that time because I was so mentally overwhelmed. And of course, as you can imagine, doing readings in a bar is not sometimes not good because you get
Can't
drunk
imagine
people,
the
you get
energy in there too.
yeah, and I sometimes you meet very toxic people too. Let's
I'm
say I
sure.
remember I was so devastated that day because I was very tired. I already did a lot of readings and I just want to pack my things and leave. And then suddenly a guy came into the the booth, yeah, my booth with a girl that, because they were, having drinks, outside the booth in the bar. And then they came in, the guy sat down and she just put, a few bucks on the table. And he said, well, I want you to tell her fortune and tell her that I should be the one she goes home with tonight. And I just said, I'm sorry, sir, I don't want to do this.
Yikes.
It's just,
Yeah.
and then I started to question myself, why am I doing this anyway, right? Am I here to entertain these kind of drunk people? Or, it was a very difficult time for me. And then eventually I think the universe was really helping me because I couldn't make the decision to quit. Because in my mind, I was thinking that if I just last longer, maybe things will get better, maybe there will be better opportunities, right? And I was hesitant, I couldn't quit. And then one day the bar manager said, oh, actually, we're closing down. The business is
Oh,
not doing
wow.
well. So
Wow.
you don't need to come here anymore. And my first reaction was, so where am I gonna do my readings? I
Yeah.
was actually quite upset. But then I think it took me some time to digest that, right? And I was thinking, this is the universe saving me from this stress, and I need to take good care of myself now because I'm not feeling well. I'm so sleep deprived. I need to go back to the center. So yeah, but I really wanted to. I was so sure about this path, right? But after, I think starting in mid 2018, that's when I started really to be able to focus on doing that kind of one-to-one consultation in my own studio, and I felt so much better.
And plus, you probably log so many hours of one-on-one to hone your skills in spite of the crazy environment, so it definitely was worth it in the long run. That's
100%.
even a more incredible story now, Letao, because it's very similar to mine. I had a health and lifestyle club in New England, and people loved it. It was a really cool, like, personal hybrid. We had Zumba and yoga and workshops on lifestyle. We did healing circles and drum circles. It was really awesome, beautiful community.
Yeah.
But I was you. I was sleep deprived. I was running the ground. I was working 7 days a week. I had no life. I mean,
Yeah.
I was just a slave to this establishment, and everyone else loved it. But it was, wow, what a toll it took on me. But like you, I had to keep it going because I didn't want to close it because people loved it.
Yeah.
And the universe had to step in and do it for me because I was going down. I was going down. It's actually why I actually hired my friend Paul Chuck, whom I've met through
Mm.
you. Even though we'd been friends for decades prior, I didn't, let's just say, work with him personally and hire him to actually help me through this crisis. But I was so mentally, physically, emotionally spent. And it was because of the pandemic when everything closed and we had the lockdown and all that. And then I was like, you know what? As hard as it is, and as guilty as I still feel closing this place on people, this is my lifeline. This is my life raft. This is Great Spirit sending me a lifeboat. Like, this is your out. And I was like, yeah, and that's when I started the podcast, and that took another pivot.
Yeah, it's like we only see that in the hindsight, right?
So
I mean,
much.
when we were experiencing that, we might feel devastated about the
Yeah.
situation, but
And it was
later
really hard. I
yeah,
was very ambivalent. I felt so guilty doing it. And it was just that story of save me or sacrifice. Like, and I kept saying, like, I am not a martyr. Like, I don't have to literally, like, put myself on the cross for everyone else. What about my life? I had no
yeah,
life. And
exactly,
so it
yeah,
was really helped me realize that I really lack self love and boundaries to be able to step up for myself, and just be like, this is killing me, everyone. I'm sorry you love it, but it's not working for me. And that Great Spirit had to step in and pull it. And it saved me.
yeah, definitely. And when we are not really doing well ourselves, we can't be a good service provider. We can't provide the so-called, yeah, the healing, the
For
therapy,
sure.
because we haven't even done
Yeah.
that for ourselves yet.
Oh, I was going down because at the end of the day, we're all human. You're not
Yeah.
going to keep going. You're not a robot, and I was definitely going down. So it pulled me out right before it was too late. And I was able to, it took me a couple of years to really get myself back. you
Yeah,
know.
good for you, good for you. Yeah.
And every now and then I still have that tendency, that sacrifice, that martyrdom. And I don't know, I've heard it can be a woman thing too, of, you're nurturing everyone else before yourself. It's hard. I mean, you probably see that with your female clients. Maybe you're male too.
Mm. It's all about balance, right? There's not no such thing called okay, sacrifice is a bad thing, or we should never sacrifice, right? I think
Yeah.
it's all about the balance. It's about that major arcana card in tarot is about being the temperance, always having two cups,
14.
pouring water. Yeah, exactly, right? And so where do we find that harmony, that inner balance there? A little bit here, a little bit there, and then we're good. Yeah. But when we are tilted to one side
Yeah.
too much and we lose our balance. Yeah.
And that's the thing, using oracle decks and tarot, whatever it is that people choose. And I really hope they check out your cards. And that's in the show notes. We're going to talk about that when we get to the end here. But, the cards, when we pull cards for the day, it's like, it's kind of almost like it's not necessarily fate. This is my opinion. Obviously, I want to know what you think, but it's not necessarily fate. It can be a forecast, and it can be like a gentle. I don't even want to say like a warning, but like for your beautiful example of temperance, I'll just admit, okay, I don't like when I pull that card, because that means so yeah, that means to me, and you get a relationship with these cards, as you mentioned at the beginning. You get a personal. Your soul will talk to you in a certain way. Like, not to get off track, but the Tower card 16 is actually a good card for me, because it always means, it always means something is going to come in out of nowhere. Insight, that lightning bolt is always good for me. And I know it can be a trouble card for most people, but I've developed a relationship with my cards that I know, oh, that's actually means I'm going to get some really good help from out of nowhere, so,
Interesting.
but for temperance, I haven't liked when I pull temperance, because it usually means I'm doing something out of balance, and it's a warning to pull it back. Either I'm drinking too much coffee today. Like, it's almost like, okay, don't drink too much coffee today, Amy. Like something's going to happen where you have to remember to keep it in balance, or stop working at 6 o'clock and put the computer away and go do something with the dogs, or so to me, that's how I use the oracle decks. What do you think about that?
I think, well, for example, let's say the temperance, right? For me, the temperance is actually not all about the so-called outward balance, right? So on the surface, of course, I think this could be about, I am doing this too much and I need to do that a little bit more, right? But I really see temperance as something that is really inside here that is balanced. Meaning that let's say the angel, right? He's having one foot in the water, one foot on the land, and that is, the so-called balance of the yin and yang. And I don't think it's purely just about like what I said here, work and work-life balance, that kind of stuff. But it's more about how do we feel about ourselves? How do we feel about, am I am I embracing too much of my either feminine energy or masculine energy? And what else do I need to, be aware of that is happening? The chemistry is happening within ourselves, right? So it's about that kind of monitoring, I feel. And of course, when we're going just day by day, we rarely really check that. And that is why a lot of the readers, when they see temperance card, the first thing they will say to their client is, have patience. So what is this patience about? It's about taking the time to really balance that inner chemistry. And that's why things sometimes take time. Usually in a love reading, especially for a single person, if the first card they put out is temperance, this is about that. You can just tell them straightforward, you got to be patient, but deep down, it's not just about sitting there and twinkling our thumbs and thinking, where's my Prince Charm, right? But it's more about, okay, but there's something to balance within ourselves.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay, I just learned a lot. That's very helpful. I'm gonna incorporate that. Thank you. I'm curious, what are some of the most this day and age, some of the most common cards that you're seeing now, or with clients? Like you mentioned, the last 2 weeks you've gotten the Helen of Troy a lot. Are there just any cards in your career, or particularly as of late, that seem to be coming up a lot, maybe at this time?
You mean in tarot cards or
in your oracle deck?
In my own oracle deck.
Yeah,
okay.
in your oracle deck.
Let me see. I've seen Penelope for sure.
That's the name of one of my dogs.
Really?
Yeah. Yep, that's a great story. Queen Penelope.
Yeah, Queen Penelope, yeah, she definitely appears a lot in readings and also Orpheus.
Okay, can you, as we get toward the end here, maybe we can kind of just, if you could briefly tell us the mythology of those two stories, that might be a great way to wrap up.
Sure. So Penelope was the queen of Ithaca, right? She was
Mm-hmm.
married to the famous hero Odysseus. Homer wrote about this story in his book, Odyssey, yeah, Iliad and Odyssey, yeah, and I love that story because, even though the whole story was about Odysseus and his journey, but Penelope was, this amazing, intelligent, and also faithful queen, waiting for him in Ithaca. But she was not waiting for him in boredom. She was, at the same time, she was very creative. She ruled the country and she used, very intelligent ways and creative ways to distract her suitors. And so, after, 20 years, when Odysseus came back, the country was prosperous. Everyone was happy, and Penelope was there as a single, not single woman, but you know what I mean, yeah. She was not with anyone else, and she was happily, still, waiting for him. And so I think this is a very beautiful story. It's a long waiting game, yeah. But at the end of the day,
20 years.
it was 20 years, absolutely. And who could do that, to be honest?
And everybody was telling her, he's dead. He went off to war. So everyone's going to think of this like, you're waiting 20 years believing that your husband is still alive and going to come home to you. And people were telling her, no, he left, or he's dead, or he's with another woman in some other country, and she had perseverance and belief and faith. And I don't know how she did
Absolutely, yeah,
that, but she
yeah.
did.
And the thing is, in the old days, right, there was no cell phone, there was no,
Yeah,
internet, right? So
right.
literally 20 years without any contact, not sure,
Just
not knowing where he
believing.
is, what he's doing, yeah, just
Yep.
believing that. And this is really,
Wow.
that's why the keyword that we put on the card is called faith.
Faith.
And of course, a lot of people associate this word faith with religion, right? But I think it goes so much,
Oh, no.
more, yeah, beyond that, right? It's
Belief.
about
Yeah.
deep down what you believe. And in the book, I mentioned one thing. I said, how some people ask, so how do I cultivate that sense of faith? And I really think that faith is not the absence of fear, but it's our ability to withstand it.
Hmm.
Because we can always have this fear about I might not have something, I might lose something, I might miss out on something. And I don't think they are contradictory to our faith.
It sounds similar to courage, the
Yeah,
definition of courage, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
We
100%.
need,
Yeah.
it takes
So
courage to have faith. Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. And so Penelope, this is, one of my favorite in the female characters in Greek mythology. I admire her so much.
Yes, and she was very smart because she devised that plan to keep her suitors at bay,
Yep.
in the 20 years by weaving the kilt or whatever she was making,
Yeah,
and then at night she'd secretly unweave it so it
yeah,
never was finished, which bide her time until her husband came home.
yeah.
So to me, it teaches us how to. I don't know. It's like I don't want to say. I don't know what the word is, Letao. It's like
I think it's her creativity. It's her creative
yeah, and
idea
it
because nobody taught her that. She created
right.
all these kind of,
Yeah.
strategies, right? And on her own. And so I think this is about her creative
But
energy.
she couldn't like directly say, no, I'm not marrying anybody. Everybody leave me alone. I'm waiting for my, like, in that day and age, she couldn't do that. They were going to make her marry someone else. So she really, to your point, had to devise her intelligence and her creativity and her imagination to come up with a plan that people would believe that would bide her some time,
Yep.
like so she was able to get what she wanted. So it's very inspiring story, and it ends beautifully because he comes home and all is good.
Yeah. And that is a reason why I've associated her with the constellation sign of Leo, because I really think that she demonstrated that Leo quality, the creativity, the faith, right? Because Leo is a
Strength.
fixed fire sign, right? So it's
Right.
about, it's something that you believe in with your inner passion and your fire, but the fire never goes off. Yeah.
I love it. And the fire is the heart. So that's beautifully perfect. And we talked about courage. So it all goes full circle. All right. And Orpheus, you're seeing Orpheus a lot. What does Orpheus have to teach us?
Orpheus is a wounded healer.
Oh,
At least that's how I see him. Yeah.
oh boy.
Orpheus, he's a musician actually. He was a legendary musician from Greek mythology.
Oh,
But the huge difference between him and other, musicians is because Orpheus didn't play music for the sake of entertainment. He was not an entertainer, but he was a healer. So his music was to heal people's pain. And because he was so talented in playing his whether you call that a harp or a lyre, yeah, lyre. Some people say lyre, some people say lyre. I don't know really the right way to pronounce it, but he's a musical instrument, and his music has such healing power that he helped so many people. But the ironic about his story was at the end of the day, he couldn't heal himself when
wow.
he lost his wife Eurydice, due to a snake bite. He descended into the underworld to face Pluto or Hades in the Greek version, and he asked Hades to give him the wife back. But Hades said, "You play a song for me. If I like it, I will consider." So he did, and of course, because of his amazing talent, he won Hades' heart. And Hades said, "Okay, I will let your wife's soul follow you all the way back to the mortal world, but you cannot look back at her before you reach the sunlight." And so Orpheus he was walking in the darkness, right, following the stairs, right, step by step back to the mortal world, and his wife's soul was actually behind him.
Mhm.
So Hades was not lying, but the more Orpheus walked, the more suspicious he grew because he couldn't hear any footsteps behind him. And then it was just dead silent. So he was thinking,
Is
what is
she
going
there?
on?
Yeah, is
Yeah,
she
she's
there?
there.
Oh boy.
Maybe Hades lied to me, right? So
Mhm.
just one step away from the sunlight, he couldn't control himself. He lost trust. So he
Yeah.
looked back, and that's how he lost Eurydice forever. And he was banned actually from entering the underworld ever again to save her. And so it's, the ending of the story was quite tragic. But
Mhm.
sometimes when I see clients putting that card out, it's almost like saying, because I see the underworld, as our subconscious realm. That's
Yep.
the deep and the darkness, right, in our psychology. And so Orpheus not trusting Hades' words deep down, it's about him not trusting his own subconsciously. He couldn't trust his own intuition, because he let all these kind of insecure thoughts distract him. So the rest of his life, he lived his life, continue to, play music and heal people, and as a therapist and as a musician, but he always had this pain in his own heart that he couldn't save his own wife. And in reading sessions, I've seen a lot of people who are healers themselves, who are either counselors or, some of them even work with disabled children. They're amazing therapists and they're amazing psychologists, and they have helped so many people around them, but there's always that streak of pain or, let's say their difficult history there. Still they're trying to overcome themselves. Yeah.
Oh my God, yes. What a great, great story. And the fact that once again, it comes back to us cultivating and respecting and having the courage to follow our intuition and developing that connection. So key, so key. Without that, you have no internal compass. And, yeah, you're just going to be a leaf in the wind and,
Yeah. And I believe that we all have a little bit Orpheus in us, really. And
yes.
I really believe that we all have that, the so-called painful history that
Yes.
everyone's has their own issues, right? Nobody's life is perfect. But I think for Orpheus is can we really transform that pain into our healing power? If we can't heal other people, can we heal ourselves?
Mhm.
It's a little bit like that. And I really think the Orpheus story is so important, right? It can, I believe this story can resonate with a lot of people. Yeah.
Well, it's like your wound is your wand, right? I mean, that is your gift to once you heal that, to then be able to have empathy and compassion to be able to connect
Yeah.
with any kind of power with others because you've been there, you walked it, and that's the whole point. That's your medicine, right?
Yeah.
Like it or
Yeah.
not, that's going to be your medicine, is your deepest wound. So, and that's why they're said to be gifts. because they make us grow. Like it
Yeah,
or not,
100%.
growing pains.
Growing
Yeah.
Yeah.
This has been amazing, Letao. Thank you so much. You obviously are just the depth of knowledge. I could talk to you all day about myths and stories because I am a believer that this is really a key to developing our lives and getting perspective on our life and helping us wrap our brains around, there's so much crazy going on and uncertainty right now. And,
Yeah.
us, zooming out and just looking at things bigger and to think of things more comprehensively with more imagination, more holistically. Very, very powerful stuff.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so where can people find this gorgeous Oracle deck? I love Oracles of Mythic Heroes, the guidebook, and
Right.
and your work, and to hire you for private counseling, for a spiritual reading and astrology reading.
Right, absolutely, yeah. So we can find this my Oracle deck, Oracle of the Mythic Heroes, on Amazon. If you just simply type in Oracle of the Mythic Heroes, or you type in my name, Letao Wang, and you will be able to find this Oracle deck easily. I actually have another Oracle deck coming out this year in June. Yeah, you will also be able to find that under my name. It's called Oracle of the Celestial Deities. So yeah, so this one, the Oracle, the Mythic Heroes, is focused on the mortal heroes journey and the heroines, right? And the second Oracle deck is called Celestial Deities, and in that deck, I talk a lot more about the gods and goddesses, right? So
well, you got to come back on the show.
I would love to, yeah.
Absolutely.
So we can see that one as a sequel of Oracle of the Mythic Heroes, a continuum.
Okay, so this one's the mortals. I got it. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
So the
it.
second one is the deities. Yeah.
You've got to come back on the show. That'd be great. I
look
got to
forward to
pick your
that.
brain about that for sure.
Yeah. And also people can find, I think our audience can find this book. You can, if you just, Google this, you can also find this in, I'm sure, in your local retail stores. I've seen Oracle of the Mystic Heroes in the States, in Canada, in Australia, in New Zealand, in UK. So, wherever you are, I believe that, if you go to a bookstore, if they carry, mind, body, spirits and cards, you should be able to find them. Also, you can find this deck of cards on my publisher's website, Beyond Words Publishing. And also you can find me to book a personal session at www.thehealingkingdom.com.
The Healing Kingdom.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Okay, and that'll be in the show notes, everybody. Wow, fantastic stuff. Thank you so much for your contribution to the world. This is such important work. And I am just really, really thrilled to connect with you. I absolutely love, I'm putting this on my bookshelf with my other favorite Oracle deck cards. And every time I need to be a little bit inspired, I'm going to go ahead and pull it out. I love it.
Thank you so much, Amy. It's such an honor for me to be on this show with you to talk about the myth. And I also, I've learned a lot from you as well. And I can see a lot of the similar journeys that we have gone through. And I look forward to talking to you again in your podcast next time.
Thank you. Isn't it amazing? Like, I feel the same way. Like, the stories that you're saying, I'm like, that happened to me too. Like, this is incredible. Like, really, it's like two paths are like, parallel. It's just really, really cool. I love when stuff like that happens. Yeah. So we really can, understand each other at a deeper level because we have very similar paths. So I love it. Yeah. And you promised now, I got it on record. You're going to come back when your deck is out. So reach out to me and we'll get you back on the show. Share that with everybody. Awesome. And don't forget, guys, that's all in the show notes. Love it so much. Check out my YouTube channel at Awakening Aphrodite Podcast, Fit Amy TV. If you want to see, as we were showing, the cards and the deck and everything during this recording, if that's convenient for you, you can check that out. And all right, everyone. Well, enjoy your mythical journey, and we'll see you next time on Awakening Aphrodite.
Would you like to support my mission to help empower people all over the world to be all of who they truly are? If so, please subscribe to the show, leave a review on iTunes, and share it with a friend. And if you're looking to take immediate action to align your energy and optimize your health, visit amyfournier.com. Thanks for listening to Awakening Aphrodite. Let's awaken her together in you. I'm your hostess, Amy Fournier, and I already can't wait to be with you again and for you to hear what I have planned for the next show.
Thanks for listening to Awakening Aphrodite with Amy Fournier. To learn more about Amy, check out her website, amyfournier.com. That's AMYFOURNIER.com. You can also check out Amy's live and on-demand virtual fitness and yoga classes, and sign up for her newsletter to receive a free mini ebook of 3 of her top tips for making holistic health a lifestyle. Again, that's amyfournier.com, and get your ebook sent to your email immediately. Connect with Amy on the daily on Instagram at FitAmyTV, FITAMYTV, and watch many of the podcast episodes and subtopic clips on her YouTube channel, which is also FitAmyTV. Enjoy, and we'll see you next time on Awakening Aphrodite.